Hey fellow Trek Chatters, I'm Pit Trekkie and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. So I have a very special episode for today. So basically we have reached it as Star Trek fans. We have reached the 30th anniversary of the release of Star Trek Voyager. Can you believe that it's been 30 years since Voyager first premiered and Caretaker, the pilot episode, premiered on our screens at 8 o'clock on that Monday, January 16th, 1995. I can't believe that we're actually 30 years past that. I mean, I'm 44 years old right now, and I remember I was 14 and in 8th grade, still in middle school when this show premiered. Actually, in my mind, this along with Deep Space Nine took me into my later adolescence. So I really wanted to do a little video talking about a little bit of the history of Voyager being made. So basically, the history of Star Trek Voyager begins in 1993. Now, think about that time. At the time, Deep Space Nine was in its, second season, and Next Generation was in its 7th season. Okay, that was in late 1993. At that time, we knew that Deep Space Nine was going to continue on for a while, but the Next Generation was going to be getting ready to go into its 7th season, and it was going to be canceled so that way Paramount could make way to make Star Trek Generations. So Paramount executives approached Rick Berman in 1993 about creating yet another Star Trek series. Now, there were a couple reasons behind this. All right. One of it was that with Next Generation leaving, that left a gap so that they wanted to have 2 Star Trek shows running concurrently. So what they decided was that, okay, we're going to go back to basics and we're going to do it on a ship, but we're going to twist the story a little bit. Now, that's part of the reason why Paramount wanted the show, but the other one was the creation of the United Paramount Network, or UPN, and that was the home of Star Trek Voyager during its entire 7-season run. So UPN's origins started back in 1993. At that time, they wanted to start a network that would have 2 nights a week of 2-hour programming for prime time. And so basically, they needed a cornerstone or flagship series for this new network. So what they did was that they decided they were going to bring the new Star Trek Voyager on as the flagship of UPN. So that's why another big area why they wanted the show to be created. Now, this actually, UPN was created by, the network basically was buying a whole bunch of many unaffiliated independent TV stations that would carry the new network, because there were so many of them in many of the TV markets out in the United States. So UPN was actually born, the idea of it, October 27th, 1993. And it finally launched on Monday, January 16th, 1995 with Star Trek Voyager at 8 p.m. This mirrors back not only TV history, but Star Trek history as well. Back in June of 1977, it was announced that there was going to be a 4th television network that was created by Paramount Television, who was actually having success in the early to mid-70s with the reruns of Star Trek and a lot of the TV shows that they were making at the time, such as Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. So they felt that they could do a 4th network. And what happened was that it was going to launch in April of 1978 with their flagship show being Star Trek Phase 2. That was going to be the only night of programming to start Star Trek Phase 2, just like with UPN, where they had 2, but it was very small. And Paramount Television Service was the name of the network, or PTVS, and what they were going to do is have one night on Saturdays. And I would assume around 8 p.m. would have been when Star Trek Phase 2 aired. And then they were supposed to have 30 TV movies of the week that were going to be airing subsequently. I'm assuming that would be 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then it would continue on to regular programming for the independent station. So what happened was that in 1978, the studio chief, Charles Bloodhorn, and the Paramount board decided that they didn't want to go ahead with the new network because they thought that they would lose money from the creation of it. So with that being, the network being scrapped, so was Star Trek Phase 2, but its pilot episode, In Thy Image, became rewritten and became Star Trek The Motion Picture. So it's very interesting how both the network TV networks and the Star Trek role in both of these networks came to be, and mirror each other as the years went on. So basically, when in 1993, Rick Berman, along with Michael Piller and Jerry Taylor, worked together to create Star Trek Voyager. And they felt, we can't have just another Starship crew where the ship's out exploring space. Like it would have just been a carbon copy, essentially, of the Next Generation, just on a different ship. So they realized they wanted it on a ship, but they wanted a smaller ship, which would be kind of a sense of family. And they also wanted, for the first time, they wanted a female captain to lead this show. They wanted it to be in the same area or era as the Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, so that way there could be overlap. And they wanted to fling the ship to a distant area of space that's never been explored, so that makes it different in terms of its relation to the Next Generation. But they also got the ability to create a whole new canvas of characters, a whole new bunch of aliens that we've never seen before, rather than relying on the Klingons, the Romulans, the Ferengi, the Cardassians, etc. So that was the very basic piece of it. They also knew that because it was working with Deep Space Nine, they were able to create internal conflict with the characters because they brought in Odo, Quark, and Kira, who were not Starfleet officers, working with Starfleet officers, and they were able to have butting heads, and that created some of the tension in the characters that you wouldn't see necessarily in the original series or Next Generation. So what they did was they created a story where, and it started on the Next Generation in the 7th season episode Journey's End. We find out that the Federation and the Cardassians have created a demilitarized zone near an area called Badlands. And there were a lot of Native American tribes that lived on one of the planets, Dorvan 5. And they were supposed to be evacuated, and they refused to leave. So a truce was basically made with the Indians and the Federation and the Cardassians that the Native Americans could stay on Dorvan 5, but they would be under Cardassian jurisdiction, which they agreed. So that episode set up Native Americans who had left Earth to settle a new planet. It set up the formation of the demilitarized zone, and it also set up the Cardassians having this treaty with the Federation. This then led to a 2-part episode in Deep Space Nine, the same season, the Maquis Part 1 and the Maquis Part 2, where we find out these Native Americans and other colonies in the demilitarized zone formed basically a terrorist organization called the Maquis to fight for their freedoms and to get the Cardassians away from their territory. And that also set up the Badlands, this area of space where ships have been known to disappear over the last year or so. That's something Kira said on the runabout in the first part. So now we have the Native Americans, we have the Cardassians, we have the demilitarized zone, we have the Badlands, and we have the Maquis. Then there was one final follow-up where we saw more of the Maquis in the penultimate episode of The Next Generation, Preemptive Strike, and that's where we saw Ro defect to the Maquis, and we just learned a little bit more about what was going on in the colonies. So those were all seeds planted so that way they could use the Maquis as the tension on board the Federation ship. So now you have Federation officers and Maquis officers that are coming together and banging heads. Plus you were to have the new first officer, after the first officer was killed, be one of the Maquis, the Maquis leader. All right. So it's very interesting the kind of the journey that the producers and the creators went on to create Voyager. So obviously they wanted to have the female captain, which was center for this. So they auditioned numerous actresses, and some of the ones who were either confirmed or rumored to have either auditioned or wanted to audition were Susan Gibney, Aaron Gray, Karen Austin, Joanna Cassidy, Blythe Danner, Patty Duke, Linda Hamilton from Terminator, Sarah Connor, and Tracy Scoggins. All right. They even auditioned a few males just in case they didn't think the female arc would work. So Gary Graham and an actor named Renee Rivera they auditioned, and then they were hoping to get somebody named Nigel Havers to also audition, but he wasn't able to do it. Okay, so originally, this is big lore when it comes to, in history, when it comes to Star Trek Voyager. The original Janeway was originally, when she was written, was named Elizabeth Janeway, and they cast a French-Canadian actress, Geneviève Bujold, to actually play the part. Well, she came on for 2 days, and she was basically in a couple of scenes on the bridge where Tom Paris and Ensign Kim first get their stations. She's also in the scene right before they go into the Badlands, before the ship gets swept away. And then there was also a part filmed where they were in the ready room and Janeway and Tuvok were talking to each other. All right. At this point, apparently there was some sort of American feminist named Elizabeth Janeway, so Jean-Pierre Bugeaud suggested that they change the name to Nicole Janeway. So she played Nicole Janeway for a grand total of 2 days. I don't know if any of you have ever seen her footage of her. She has no emotion whatsoever. She might as well have been a Vulcan like Tuvok was. This woman, she was just walking around very carefully, very specific, very detailed in the way she enunciated and said things. She brought no actual life. If you watch those scenes on the special edition of the DVD set for season 1 of Voyager, and then watch those exact same scenes in the episode of Caretaker, totally different. Kate Mulgrew knocked it out of the park. But so I think what happened basically is she was not used to the rigors of filming a show and filming the amount of dialogue that they had to do in a certain amount of time. She apparently also didn't like the fact that the directors would be changing on a regular basis. And there was a rumor that I read about online is she actually went to her trailer and started bursting out crying in between sessions. And Rick Berman and the director finally went to her and say, you know what, this isn't for you, we're going to release you. And then they bring Kate Mulgrew back in to audition, and she got the part, and Star Trek history was made. So, the next part I'm going to talk about in terms of creating the show was the ship. So Voyager was meant to only have a crew of about 150 people, this Intrepid-class ship. And I'm glad that the creators actually did that, because if they would have had a ship like the Enterprise D with 1,000 people on board, you'd still have all these people. You'd have a family. They would all be there for a group purpose, but they wouldn't become as interknit per se. So having only 150 people on board the ship gave the crew a chance to bond with each other in a better, stronger way. And obviously would be hard at the beginning of the series with the Federation crew and the Maquis crew coming together and having to work towards a common goal. All right. Then afterwards, they started to come up with the character descriptions. And I wanted to go over the actual season 1 descriptions of the characters from basically the creation Bible. Captain Catherine Janeway. Catherine Janeway is a Starfleet captain who leads the combined teams of Starfleet and Maquis personnel. She is a tough captain who's not afraid to take chances. While not the only female captain in Starfleet, her intelligence, thoughtfulness, dedication, and diplomacy have earned her respect and recognition as one of the best Starfleet captains, male or female. Lieutenant Tom Paris. Tom Paris comes from a proud family of Starfleet legends. When the pressures of living up to the family name result in tragedy, Paris turned to the Maquis for fulfillment as a fighter pilot. The endeavor ended in tragedy with Paris captured by the Federation as a renegade. Taken from prison and given a second chance by Captain Janeway, Paris boards the starship Voyager determined to prove his worth to the captain and himself. Chakotay. This fearless captain of the Maquis ship agrees to become first officer of the starship USS Voyager when his crew joins forces with the Federation. A Native American who attended Starfleet Academy and became a lieutenant commander, Chakotay resigned his position to join the Maquis, a group of freedom fighters. When he is reunited with the Federation aboard the starship USS Voyager, he quickly wins the respect of even the most die-hard Starfleet veterans. Tuvok. Tuvok, a Vulcan male, is the Starfleet tactical/security officer for the starship USS Voyager. His fit and active regimen and his ability to use his physical skills in battle inspire the Voyager crew, while his Vulcan equanimity and calm demeanor make him a valued peacekeeper on the ship. Tuvok is one of the most experienced members of the crew with his powerful combination of wisdom, experience, and vitality. Now, I'm going to pause there for a second. Early on when Voyager was being created, Tuvok was described as being older and wiser, as about a Vulcan of 160 years. They cast Tim Russ in the role and they scaled back the age a little bit. He seemed to be more middle-aged, but with the actual character that we got. And no one ever said, boy, we really Tuvok really inspires us. He's just an amazing person. You didn't always see Tuvok using big physical skills. He did train the crew in the first season finale. I believe it was called Learning Curve. With that group of Maquis that he was trying to discipline. You did see him jogging around the ship. In Basics Part 2, we actually saw him using bows and arrows. But you never really saw Tuvok going and being Mr. Strongman out there, fighting to keep the peace. So I think it's a very interesting early on description of him. Harry Kim. Harry Kim is fresh out of the Starfleet Academy when he is made the Operations/Communication Officer of the Starship Voyager. Though he enjoyed a stellar academic career and welcomes the challenges and adventures of space exploration, Harry is nervous about living up to his own expectations. Being lost so far from home is hardest on Harry, who has grown up under the loving shelter of his parents. Well, we saw that during all 7 years. B'Elanna Torres. B'Elanna, a beautiful half-Klingon female, is the ship's chief engineer. A former student at Starfleet Academy, B'Elanna quit and joined the Maquis. She is tough, knowledgeable, and independent, but her mixed heritage has manifested itself into a state of confusion and denial. Now that B'Elanna is unable to release her frustrations through fighting the Cardassians, she must learn to accept herself and her conflicting heritage. And I think that's wonderful that they brought, at least that we could still have some sort of Klingon connection to the Alpha Quadrant in this series. And having the dualness of the characters and having the human side and the Klingon side fighting each other, it caused not only conflict amongst the crew with her temper, but the conflict was also within herself. So she was a very multi-layered character, and we really watched B'Elanna grow over those 7 seasons, from this uncontrollable freedom fighter to a disciplined Starfleet officer as chief engineer, and also as well as becoming a wife and a mother. Neelix. From a galaxy never explored before, Neelix is a male alien, unlike any ever encountered in the Star Trek universe. On the starship USS Voyager, he serves as guide, cook, and all-around handyman. Oftentimes, he designates himself the commentator on the human condition. Neelix is a charming yet scraggly scavenger with wit and instincts that have enabled him to survive this dangerous part of space. So, Neelix was actually the last character to be fleshed out. Kes was actually fleshed out before he was. And basically, his name was going to be Felox, F-E-L-O-X, initially. And they kind of wanted him to be like this dirty scavenger kind of character. And they wanted his kind of humor to be on par with kind of Quark. Like he was this bad guy, but there was a good piece in him. That didn't kind of work out. Neelix was always kind of just the jovial, joking kind of character, But and I'm glad that they did that, because we didn't want a carbon copy of Quark. And Neelix brought his own fun and excitement into his role during the 7 years. Kes. Kes is a female alien from the Ocampa species, a type of alien never before seen in the Star Trek universe. She is the delicate, beautiful young lover of Neelix, and although she appears as a 28-year-old in human years, or 20 years old in human years, Kes is actually a 1-year-old Ocampa, a species with a lifespan of only 9 years. Kes adores Neelix and helps him with the cooking aboard the starship USS Voyager, but she much prefers her time exploring the starship and making new friends. Unfortunately, we never got to fully see what happened to Kes, because she was written off the show at the very beginning of the 4th season. We did get some resolution in the 6th season episode Fury. All it really kind of basically insinuated was that she returned to Ocampa, where she would finally die. Doc Zimmerman. Doc is a holographic figure, an emergency medical program devised by Starfleet. When the ship's doctor is killed, Doc Zimmerman becomes the resident physician aboard the starship USS Voyager. He is programmed with up-to-date medical knowledge and is capable of treating any disease or injury. So they didn't really have any character detail, except for the fact that he was a hologram who was able to take over for the ship's chief medical officer during an emergency. And as we know, he never got his name. In the 1st season, they were starting to hint around that he wanted a name, but for some reason that fell through, and he was never called Doc Zimmerman. He was always just the Doctor. And he's still the Doctor, even in Star Trek Prodigy. All right? But we did see his creator, Dr. Louis Zimmerman, in one episode of Deep Space Nine, and a hologram of him on Voyager, and also one time on in the season 6 episode of Voyager, Lifeline. So that was the original crew list. And one other thing about this show, Voyager was the last Star Trek show to use any form of model work. They used it obviously in all the other series before that because they didn't have CGI technology. But by the 3rd season, they had switched to completely CGI graphics. Now, there were still stock shots of the Voyager model on the show in the later seasons because of the stock shots, but for basically all the other shots, they switched to CGI, and so did Deep Space Nine later in its run as well. Now, Voyager premiered on Monday, January 16th, 1995. In terms of its ratings, it saw the highest ratings that it would actually ever see, and that was approximately 21.3 million people. The show never reached that level of viewership again, unfortunately, not even for the finale. So it started out very strong. Also during the 7 years of Voyager, Voyager was nominated for 34 Emmy Awards. Most of them were in technical categories, and they actually won 7 of those awards, including Outstanding Individual Achievement in Main Title Theme Music for Jerry Goldsmith's iconic theme for Star Trek Voyager. So what kind of legacy does Star Trek Voyager leave? Well, there's definitely the novel series that has been created. Obviously, Paramount, or not Paramount, but Pocket Books created a series of what are called the numbered books, and there were a total of 26 of them that ranged from 1995 to 2001. There were also a couple hardback books as well that were created for the series as well. In 2003, Pocket Books took a decision that they made when they relaunched Deep Space Nine after the series to do the same thing with Voyager. So there was a book relaunch of Voyager that was created. It lasted several different volumes and explained what happened to the crew of Voyager after they returned to the Alpha Quadrant. There were also 3 video games that were released for this. Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. It was released for the PC in 2000 and for PlayStation 2 in 2001. I remember the Elite Force commercials at the end of the episodes during the final credits in the 7th season of Voyager. I still have them recorded on VHS. There was also an arcade game released called Star Trek Voyager The Arcade Game. That was released in 2002. And then Star Trek Elite Force 2 was released in 2003. The PS2 game Star Trek Encounters also features the ship and characters from the show. And Star Trek Voyager's Elite Force drew revenues of $15 million and sold roughly 300,000 units worldwide by 2003. At this point, you don't really hear much about the video game. It's just relegated to Star Trek history at this point. So that's my basic review overall of Star Trek Voyager. So what I'm going to be doing starting on January 16th, which is tomorrow as of this recording, I'm going to be watching Caretaker, and I'm going to be doing an all-year-long rewatch of all 7 seasons of Voyager, and then I'm going to, after I finish each season, I want to actually do a review of the season for here on Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. So I'll be looking forward to starting that tomorrow. I'd like to hear your thoughts about what were some of your memories of the beginning of Star Trek Voyager. Mine actually goes all the way back, not to just opening night, but I believe it was late 1993, where actually my mom showed me a clipping inside TV Guide that talked about there being a new series. And I remember being like, another new series already? Deep Space Nine just came on. You know, so that was my start with it. And then obviously and then in October of 1994, TV Guide had Captain Janeway on the cover, Kate Mulgrew, but she had a different style of hair, as you can see in this picture. All right, and then that led to 1995 with the release of Voyager on UPN. So please tell me some of your memories of Voyager, and not only just the beginning of it, but watching it. I'd love to hear your comments. Please put them in the comments below, and I'll get back to you with responses. You can follow the show. Obviously, you just go to YouTube, type in Pittsburgh's Trek Chat in the search engine. It'll take you directly to my channel. You can watch previous episodes. You can follow the show on Facebook, facebook.com/Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. You can also follow the show on X at PGH Trek Chat. Looking forward to the next episode, and until then, may yins live long and prosper.